Welcome back. As you know, I'm Eli, the computer guy, here for the Daily Blob to remind you that once the American government starts taking something really seriously, you can pretty much guarantee that thing is darn near obsolete. So I find this to be an interesting story right now with the AI arms race between the United States and the Chinaman, right? Trump is fighting the good fight to get our AI out of the Chinaman's pocket, right? And Chinaman is out there trying to build his own AI, and all we hear is AI, AI, AI. AI is everything. If we do not win in the AI arms race, apparently everything will be lost because it's more dangerous than nuclear weapons. Again, I'm the Aspie in the room. I'm the Aspie in the room who will just ask the question, why do we have open APIs to our nuclear weapons? Maybe the real problem isn't AI, it's APIs to nuclear weapons. Maybe those are the things we should get rid of. But anyways, I'm an Aspie, so people don't listen to me. Anyways, what is interesting though is the problem, a lot of times for governments, is by the time the politicians understand something might be significant, the time period for that thing has actually gone into the past. So I've been talking a lot lately about China producing all of this AI hardware. They're producing AI hardware, they're producing AI software, and they're trying to compete with NVIDIA. One of the things I haven't been talking about as much lately is the fact of the matter is that a lot of companies and a lot of organizations are actually trying to diverge from the NVIDIA path, right? We hear NVIDIA, right, owns AI hardware. AMD rents a little bit of AI hardware, and everybody else is just who the hell cares. What's interesting though is if you actually follow this and you look at what the big players are doing, what you realize is that a lot of the big players are actually building their own proprietary AI hardware and have been doing so for a little while now, and that NVIDIA's relevance has actually been decreasing for a period of time. Now, when I say decreasing, I'm not saying this. I'm not saying it went off the cliff. I'm just saying it has been going down slowly. And then there is that question of, if you start going down slowly, when do you end up going off of the cliff? And so a lot of these companies out there, they're trying to figure out what do they need out of their AI hardware, right? We talk about inference. So inference is using an AI model to produce a result for computer vision, voice analysis, that type of thing. Training is what requires the real resources, and that's what's actually creating the model. And so one of the big things out there is that we have a lot of very expensive, high-powered hardware going to do rather mundane tasks. And so one of the questions is, again, if you're going to be something like a systems architect, is, hey, what can we offload? What tasks can we offload to a lower cost, lower resource hardware so that we can actually, save some money, right? When these companies go from startup world to actually business world, they're going to have to worry about their profit loss statements. And so using a $40,000 GPU to run some, basic model inferencing is probably not the best resource utilization, right? And so we have a lot of companies out there trying to figure that out. And I've talked about this before. Meta is producing their own chips. Google is producing their own chips. Amazon is actually producing their own AI chips already, and they have been doing so for a while. But nobody talks about it because, I don't know. I really don't know. I feel like when we talk about AI, you either have to say NVIDIA, you either have to talk about NVIDIA, or you have to talk about Chinaman. You can't talk about all this other work going on. I've talked about that before with, there's this company called Grok. Oh, is it Grok? It's not the Grok. It's not Twitter Grok. It's a different Grok. It's not XAI. It's another Grok company out of Europe. What's interesting about them is they actually, their claim to fame is being able to spin up an inference for AI, an inference data center in 5 weeks. They can go from you want an inference data center to you got an inference data center. Think about that. Building the entire damn thing out, supposedly, in 5 weeks. People really aren't talking about that a lot, which is one of those curious things. And this is where I talk about the whole AI thing. This story, we've already seen this story play out. We've seen this story play out with Netscape. Remember Netscape Navigator in 94 or whatever? 94, before I used it, they used to sell that for $40, $40 a copy in the 90s. So that'd be like $80, $100. God knows, $5,000 nowadays. Anyways, they used to sell Netscape Navigator for a real amount of money, right? That made Netscape a valuable company. Mark Andreessen, he became a billionaire. I don't know if he became a billionaire. Anyways, became very rich off of that company because they sold a web browser for $40. And then Microsoft came in and did what Microsoft does. Wow, look at that valuable product you have that's making you a lot of money. Yeah, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna give it away for free. And so that's one of the things I really want you to consider, right? There's these whole arguments about like the value of things. When we talk about the value of AI, is AI a valuable function? Yes, I'm not arguing about that. But the question is are the companies worth the valuations, right? OpenAI being worth $500 billion. Anthropic being worth $183 billion, XAI being worth over $150 billion, right? You can have a societally valuable product that might actually, in fact, change the world. Hey, no sequel. But it doesn't mean it's gonna lead to trillion-dollar value businesses, right? MongoDB, I mean, unless I'm missing something, maybe I missed it, MongoDB is not, in fact, worth $1 trillion. No sequel, in fact, changed this world, and yet I have never had anybody over a pint of beer at a tech meetup go, oh, have you invested in MongoDB yet? No, because for some reason investing in NoSQL is boring and lame and stupid, but investing in AI is sexy and obvious. Anyways, I find all of this stuff kind of curious, and that's why I bring up these stories like this, where OpenAI is set to start mass production of its own AI chips with Broadcom. So Broadcom is, I'm not quite sure if it's a fabless or a fab-light manufacturer. So a fab in the processor world, the silicon world, are the people that actually produce the chips, right? So TSMC is the one that you've heard of. Intel, I don't know, Intel's a fab, I suppose, right? Anyways, they actually produce the chips. There's fabless, and basically what fabless folks are is they design chips that then basically they just outsource the production to someplace else. Looking into Broadcom, I think Broadcom does, or maybe did, it does get confusing, own a few fabs, but a lot of their work is basically fabless work. And so basically what OpenAI is doing is they're going to Broadcom to say, we would like these AI chips to be designed and basically deal with that whole process for us. Because what they're finding is there's a bottleneck in actually being able to get their hands on NVIDIA GPUs. So a lot of what Chinaman is going through, right? They're trying to access NVIDIA GPUs. From their side, there's just a bottleneck. Just so many people want the GPUs. They can't get their hands on enough of them, right? They want to scale. One of the things I've talked about before is risk mitigation strategies. If you need to scale your infrastructure, you want to buy 1,000 or 10,000 of something now, and you want to buy 10,000 of something next year, what happens if you're not guaranteed being able to get 10,000 next year? Is it worth the risk of using this particular product in order to scale up? OpenAI is literally dealing with the exact same problem that Chinaman is dealing with for slightly different reasons, just because of the demand is so high. And so one of their problems is simply, can we get our hands on enough processors? If they go out and they basically subcontract a production of GPUs as processing units to somebody else, that gives them more control over whether they can get the number of chips that they actually need to scale in the time frame that they need to scale. The other thing is to think about with price. Again, NVIDIA is putting out these GPUs. These Blackwell GPUs are $40,000 a pop. One of the servers is something like $200,000 a pop. Once you start shipping a lot of these things, right, all of a sudden, right, even theoretically, if it's only a 1% improvement in price, much less a 10 or 20% improvement in price, that can start getting, very valuable very quickly. I mean, think about this. If it costs $20,000 for an NVIDIA AI server, if you can reduce the price simply down to $180,000, right, that's $20,000, that's 10%. For the corporate world, doing that once actually doesn't matter. $20,000 to the real corporate world, they don't give a crap. But, if you're putting in thousands, you're deploying thousands of these servers per month, thousands times $20,000 a month or $20,000 per, that actually starts ending up being real money. And that's another thing that a lot of these AI companies are going to have to start thinking about, right? They've been going for these stratospheric valuations, and they have been burning money. And when I say they've been burning money, again, I will be snarky about it, but it's actually not that snarky, they have this idea, they have this concept of if you monopolize a market, if you're a first mover and you monopolize a market, then you'll be able to print money later. So basically you burn money. You burn your money until you monopolize the market, and then you print money. And so it doesn't matter if a GPU costs $40,000, fuck, buy 10,000. Nah, screw that, buy 15,000 of them, right? If a data center is gonna cost $1 billion to put up, hey, make sure you put up 2 or 3, right? Because they're getting so much. We talked about this with Anthropic. Anthropic got a $13 billion round. That's not their valuation. Their valuation is $183 billion. They got $13 billion in a single funding round, and an enormous amount of that is going to go to hardware. But the thing is, right, at some point, they have to transition from startup world, where they burn money, to actual business world, where they pretend like there's a potential on a return on investment, right? And so one of the things they need to be thinking about is, okay, how can we get this hardware cost down? And so that's one of the things, be thinking about building their own hardware. And what I want you to really start understanding here, like with this AI hardware, is wait a minute, right? If Amazon is building AI hardware, and Google is building AI hardware, and Azure, Microsoft is building AI hardware, and Meta is building AI hardware, and Chinaman is building AI hardware, it's almost like AI hardware is becoming incredibly commoditized. And the actual value of said AI hardware might be dropping, even as people keep dumping more and more money into AI hardware companies, right? I've talked about this before with the models, right? It's go out there, play with Microsoft Pi 3.5. It's either Pi 3 or Pi 3.5. It's a 2 billion parameter model from Microsoft. And I'll tell you, it works pretty damn good. I can literally run Pi. I can run Pi off of one of these. This is a 2012 MacBook Pro with 4 gigs of RAM. This is now almost in 2026. This is almost a 14-year-old computer with 4 gigs of RAM, and you can run Pi 3 or 3.5 on this thing. And that becomes the interesting question. Well, wait a minute. If I can actually get good results, if I can get valuable results out of 3.5, then I don't need the latest, most powerful models, right? I need the systems that will provide me the most appropriate results. If Pi 3 or 3.5 gives me the most appropriate results, I don't need to buy a $200,000 NVIDIA server. And this is, I don't know, this is the kind of stuff I scream into the void. And then everybody calls me a moron. You don't understand. Eli, I learned Node 6 months ago. And if you had been doing Node as long as I had been doing Node, you would understand a little something about the tech industry. Anyways, it's coming from the Financial Times. ChatGPT maker deal sends shares of U.S. chip group up more than 9%. OpenAI is set to produce its own AI chip for the first time next year, as a ChatGPT maker attempts to address insatiable demand for computer power and reduce its reliance on chip giant NVIDIA. The chip, co-designed with U.S. semiconductor giant Broadcom, would ship next year, according to multiple people. Broadcom's chief executive, Hock Tan, on Thursday referred to a mystery new customer committing to a $10 billion order. So it looks like OpenAI will be ordering $10 billion of AI chips from Broadcom. And the interesting thing here is when we look at things like I guess purchasing power parity is something you consider, right? When somebody buys something and produces something in China, it costs less to do it Anyways, one of the curious things to be thinking about here is a $40,000 GPU. So $40,000 NVIDIA GPU, you divide $10 billion by $40,000, and that would give you an idea of how many NVIDIA GPUs you would get. What's kind of interesting here, though, is if they design these processors to do specifically what they need, the price for performance may sink dramatically. And so the resource results that they get out of this $10 billion might be a hell of a lot more than you would be expecting. OpenAI's move follows a strategy of tech giants such as Google, Amazon, and Meta, which have designed their own specialized chips to run AI workloads. The industry has seen huge demand for the computing power to train and run AI models. OpenAI planned to put the chip to use internally, according to one person close to the project, rather than make them available to external customers. This is the other interesting thing. Beyond the China man, Western man divide, right? So we have been working in a paradigm for a long damn time, since the 80s, right? Basically the Wintel duopoly. The idea is that you use x86 processors, basically use Intel processors, and you use a Microsoft operating system, and then you put other stuff on top of that, right? Those are the two core. And that's how a lot of us learned how to build infrastructure, right? Whether you're building client computers and servers, whether you're building file servers, whether you're building VoIP, voice over IP servers, whether you're building surveillance servers, all the servers out there have basically worked under this duopoly, the Wintel duopoly. One of the curious things is, beyond the diversion of China and the United States, is we're actually starting to see the fracturing of the industry internally, where they're all starting to use their own specialized hardware, which is going to be, it's interesting for somebody of my generation. I remember the days where if you wrote a term paper in WordPerfect, the only way to import that term paper from WordPerfect into Star Office was to retype the entire paper. True story. True story, right? Right? You had WordPerfect, and you had Microsoft Word version like 1, and you had something called Star Office, and you had a couple other things out there. Literally, you could not import and export. Like now, like you can go from Word into LibreOffice, and it might screw up the formatting, but more or less it's fine. It'll take you a couple of minutes to fix things up. That's about it. No, back in the day, the way to import was retype. One of the things that I do think is kind of curious with this division in the tech world now, as we start leaving convergence, right? So there was this concept in the mid-2000s, it was called convergence. So before that, the idea was all technology was siloed, right? If you dealt with telephone systems, so I was a telephone system administrator, you dealt with these things called 110 or 66 blocks, basically for how you connect telephone wiring. You used Cat3 cable. You either used a digital or analog telephone system. Again, I was in Defendi is what I was trained in. And that was its own world, right? It might have a network port in your $30,000 PBX that's sitting on the wall. It may have a single network port so you can run reports or that type of thing. But that was it, right? If you had a surveillance system, there's something called Siamese cable. It's basically a coax cable with power on it. The cameras were analog cameras that would go back to a DVR, digital video recorder. From there, you would connect it and people could see stuff. So it was all siloed, right? So surveillance system used their own cabling, their own equipment. Telephone system used their own cabling, their own equipment. Computers, obviously, own cabling, their own equipment. Access control, its own cabling, its own equipment, right? In 2005-ish, we started doing this convergence, right? Basically bringing everything on to the Ethernet networking standard, basically more or less using the TCP/IP protocol. So now your telephone uses TCP/IP, your surveillance camera uses TCP/IP, your access control system uses TCP/IP, the whole 9 years. It's the idea is it brings everything into this one world, which is many times good, many times fucking fabulous. Sometimes not so good. Anyways, what I think is interesting though, is we spent decades bringing all this crap together. And what's interesting is to see is how this technology is now starting to fracture. And it's one of those things to consider with your technology career. Again, jobs, if you want a job, it's something to consider. Like when I got my MCSE, I could work in a hospital, I could work on a military facility, I could work at a school, I could work at an interior design firm, I could work for a construction company. Everybody used, Windows client, Windows server, and Cisco networking equipment. So it didn't matter, right? No matter what your vertical was, you were using the same stuff. So you could just get your MCSE and go. It's not 2000 anymore. I'm gonna say something controversial here. It's not 2000 anymore. Everybody's using all kinds of weird ass crap nowadays. And so one of the things to consider is like where can you find your valuable niche, especially as everything starts fracturing. I've talked about this before, where I knew these two people that ran a development company, and they did development for the Nook, the N-O-O-K from Barnes & Noble. And it was weird. Nook was never that popular, right? So the Kindle came out, the Kindle was fine. Barnes & Noble was like, we'll do that too. Yeah. Anyways, they came out with the Nook. Nook was fine. I mean, there's nothing particularly wrong with the Nook. It's just, again, Amazon actually had first mover advantage, had pretty darn good product, and Nook could never keep up. But Nook, Barnes & Noble Nook, one of the things that came out was like a tablet, right? Everybody's coming out with their own tablet, customized Android tablet. And the interesting thing was, so this development company basically designed for the Nook. And I was talking to them, and I was just like, why? What is the Nook's market share? Is it 2%? Like, iPad owns like 80% of the market at that time or whatever. Android owns 20% of the market. You know, whatever, Nook probably owns like 0.5% of the market. And so it's just like how do you not starve creating apps for the Nook? And the curious thing is they said, well, actually, we're doing really well. I'm like, what? Stop your lying. They're like, no, Eli, your question is why we're doing so well. So what they said is basically nobody else developed for the Nook. Nobody developed for the Nook. But the thing is, right, you'd have moms and dads. It would be like Christmas time or be whatever, birthdays or whatever else. They go into Barnes & Noble and they'd see this Nook. And so they would want to give their kid something that was educational, but also kind of fun. So like, wow, we'll give our kid the Nook, because they don't know what the fuck's going on. Hey, you know how your mommy and daddy told you if you went to a coding boot camp, everything would be wonderful? Yeah, I'm here to tell you, your mommy and daddy don't know what the fuck's going on in the tech world. Shocking. Anyways, because your mommy and daddy don't know what the fuck's going on in the tech world, instead of getting the kid an iPad, or instead of getting the kid at least, an Android thing, they will get them the Nook. And then here's the thing, nobody develops shit for the Nook, because nobody gives a fuck about the Nook. And so, when mommy and daddy are sitting there and they set up the little Nook for little Timmy or Tyrone or whatever at Christmas, they would then want to go and they would want to buy some apps for the Nook so that their kid has something to play with. Well, here's the thing. If nobody develops for the Nook and you're one of the only people that does, you can actually make quite a bit of money when the parents are like, I don't know what the hell this is, but sure, I'll pay $5. You scale that amongst all the dumbass mommy and daddies who bought Nooks, and apparently you actually make a decent amount of money. And so that's one of the things to consider right now. As the tech world is fracturing, there is going to become more and more of these really fucking random but valuable niches. And that is the type of thing that you're going to need to find. That is why you need to start being nice to people. That's why you need to start talking to people. That's why you need to understand how business and all this kind of stuff works. So instead of saying, how do I get a job? You can say, hey, where are the possibilities? What has the best perspective for making an outsized profit in 2025? That type of thing. Let's see here. Last year began an initial collaboration with Broadcom, OpenAI. Broadcom does not disclose the names of these new customers, but people familiar with the matter confirmed OpenAI was the new client. Tan said that the deal had lifted the company's growth prospects by bringing, quote, immediate and fairly substantial demand, shipping chips for the customer, quote, pretty strongly from next year. So this will be the interesting thing to see how this goes into the future, because it's one of those things that's always kind of bubbling in the background. I've done videos, I've talked about Meta creating their own processors, I've talked about Amazon creating their own processors. You know, about every 6 months a news article comes up like this and then it disappears again because nobody cares. Because it's weird. Everybody is hyper focused on AI, except what I would argue is important stuff. Like, it's interesting here in Asheville. I just went to Hacks and Hops. It's an AI meetup. They had like 90 people. It was ridiculous. There's like 90 people at an AI meetup in Asheville. And to be clear, like most tech meetups get like 10 or 20 people at the most. But the fascinating thing is all they talk about is like prompts, like prompty type stuff. Like, how can you type in things to a prompt? How can you use ChatGPT specifically? Or how do you use this product specifically? It's not about caching or RAG. RAG never fucking comes up in these conversations. It's always about whatever, interacting. And it's curious, they get 90 people showing up. There's one of the people that I know here is actually a real AI professional that came from one of the real big cities for whatever reasons. He actually created an AI meetup to deal with the real technology stuff, like the real technology stuff. Yeah, nobody showed up, so he stopped doing it. Again, another real story. When you talk about artificial intelligence, it's all about ChatGPT and how you can type in a prompt and the prompt will do a day's worth of work for you. That is what is exciting. Actually understanding RAG and CAG and, you know, MCPs and that kind of stuff, nobody shows up to. The real world of business. So I do think this is kind of curious, and if you are an actual technology professional, this is the kind of stuff that you have to look at. I would argue, I think we're getting to peak NVIDIA. I think we might have actually already hit peak NVIDIA a little while ago, and we're going to start seeing what the world looks like after peak NVIDIA. And that's what you need to be able to bring to your customers or to your boss, right? This whole idea of, do we need to buy a $5,000 GPU, a single $5,000 GPU? Or is a cluster of pretty crappy computers, will they be able to do what it is we need done? Again, if you're doing things like taxonomy, so taxonomy is like categorizing or tagging things. So let's say you have a company and you need to tag images, right? How quickly does that actually need to occur? You drop $5,000 or $10,000 on a GPU, and you'll be able to tag those images using a model quickly, right? I mean, like every second or two, you should be able to spit out. All right. But that's going to cost you quite a bit of money. One of the things to think about, though, is if you take an hour, maybe 1 hour, to write a queuing system. So basically, here's your folder of images, and then basically it'll just simply process one image after the other, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Do you actually need instantaneous processing, or do you need, reasonably quick processing, I suppose? And that's the thing, like the difference between a $10,000 or $20,000 server versus a $500 box that was collecting dust up until you dragged it out of the closet literally might be on whether or not you simply write, a queuing system that takes you an hour to write. And these are the kinds of things you need to be thinking about. Again, with AI, AI is just a fucking stack. All AI is a stack. As an actual technology professional, not the fucking node developer. Node developers, they're dinosaurs already. They are dead tech professionals walking, right? But if you're an actual tech professional, you just look at these things as stacks, and then you talk to the people, you talk to the vested interests You try to figure out what your resources are, you try to figure out what your timeline is, you try to figure out what your institutional knowledge is in order to be able to support systems that you spin up, and you bring all of that together in order to deploy solutions. And that's what we do. Whether we're deploying MySQL or Postgres or SQLite, whether we're deploying storage arrays, whether we're deploying replication strategies or high availability failover or any of these things, that is always what we're doing. We're talking the vested interest. What do you need? What do you want? What resources are you willing to give me? And how much time do I have? And then as an institution, what are we able to support? It doesn't matter whether it's a fucking database system or failover or virtualization or AI. That is our job. So anyways, what do you think about this? What do you think about OpenAI set to start mass producing, anyways, they are going to start having chips mass produced for them for their AI workloads coming from Broadcom. What do you think about this? With all of the major tech players, they are designing their own AI chips. Like we keep being told we need to be scared of China. At the exact same time, our folks are basically commoditizing this product. What do you think about it? What do you think about AI essentially becoming a commoditized product at the exact same time? Our politicians think that they should be worrying about it or whatever else. Put your thoughts down below. Give us a thumbs up, give us a thumbs down. Call me amazing, call me stupid. Just do it down in the comment section. In the modern world of YouTube, all that matters is that interaction. I will remind you that silicondojo.com does still exist. We are going to be having another fireside chat with the CEO of a $2 billion cybersecurity company so that he can crush your dream. Crushing your hopes and dreams is just exhausting. That's why I'm bringing in people to do it for me. That's called outsourcing. Anyways, we are having him come in. He's going to be coming in early October. We are also going to start doing in-person classes again in Durham and probably here in Asheville, North Carolina. That will be coming up at some point. There's a couple of things that have to be done. So if you're interested in in-person classes, if you're interested in the fireside chat, make sure to become a member of silicondojo.com. And with that, see y'all later.